All right, our final presentation today. Today we have Dr. Stephanie Bullard. She's a senior engineer to the Assistant Secretary at North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. The presentation today is entitled Breaking Down the Silos, Multimedia PFAS Workgroup. The way for North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality to continue to bring science-based environmental stewardship to North Carolina is to increase the knowledge base and capacity for staff across all divisions and offices in a bottom-up and a top-down approach. Therefore, the goal of this presentation is to highlight how we took a mechanistic approach to assessing and prioritizing PFAS industries across North Carolina and developing a curriculum to go through case studies to identify what is known and not known about an industry and build specific expertise and critical thinking skills for others to be able to dig deeper and more comprehensively into PFAS industries. Dr. Bullard, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So if you're not aware, North Carolina DEQ has been dealing with PFAS since 2017, once we discovered the release of Gen-X from chemours. PFAS is a unique compound. It has the strongest bond that can be made in organic chemistry. And one of the reasons why it's so challenging and so persistent in the environment is the bond strength. So going back to what you might remember learning about in high school or in college is the electronegativity and the relative differences between carbon and fluorine are why the bond is so strong. But we talk a lot about bond strength, but when we think about the fate and transport of these compounds, we also have to take into account the long chain and the short chain aspects. I'm sure everyone has heard about that since you've been learning about PFAS. And the one thing we can keep in mind is that long chain and short chain will have various fate and transport in the environment. I think we all know by now that PFAS is used broadly across consumer products that I'm sure we all have in our households. It's not just an industrial manufacturing challenge to look at PFAS in the environment, but it can be used in other things. What we're finding is, as Dan, I believe, alluded to earlier, is that PFAS is not just a North Carolina specific challenge, it's across the US and it's also globally. We're finding the presence of PFAS in pristine environments where we would not have any anthropogenic inputs to that environment. What's important today is to note when looking at the life cycle of PFAS, when we look at production, manufacturing, the eventual use, and then once we're done with that product, the waste management aspect of it, each one of those parts of this life cycle deal with emissions, and those are multimedia emissions. When we look at the use and the potential eventual disposal, it gets even more complex when we look at where a specific PFAS containing product can be disposed of and what the potential emissions might be from that waste management aspect. So we're really looking at the air, water, and waste aspects. If you're familiar with permitting a facility from a regulatory agency, and even if your facility that you're working with is across all three of these divisions, most of the time you're just going directly to air, water, or waste to get the respective permits that you need. So to date, the regulatory infrastructure is very siloed, but because PFAS is so widely used and is no longer a single media issue, we're now challenging the way that regulatory agencies have operated by breaking down those silos and having to work together to comprehensively understand that industry. So the first thing that we had to do to prioritize and set up these working groups was to understand the extent and the universe of industries in North Carolina that deal with PFAS. This was done by doing a comprehensive literature review and also looking at the Federal Registry and other EPA reports to bring together how many industries deal with PFAS. One of the things that we found is that when we're looking at industries that either directly deal with it, indirectly produce it, or are suspected to use it, we had approximately 387 different industries based on their NCDEQ codes that have been identified in the literature. So the next step that we did is we asked each of our divisions, water, waste, and air, to go through their permits and compile a list of those industries that match that NAICS code or that SIC code. And we compiled all of those industries that were across all three of those divisions. And taking into account unique owners, we had 2,800 facilities and 1 in 22 permits that dealt with PFAS. When we're looking just at the breakdown of those facilities, these were the top 5 industries that were across all three of our divisions and dealt with PFAS. These are not based on a mass basis. These are strictly based on the number of facilities across North Carolina. So what we did is we wanted to prioritize which industries we should look at. We got input from the division directors, senior leadership, but also the individuals that are permitting these facilities and inspecting these facilities to determine which industries we should start with for our multimedia working group and to further evaluate. What our goal is to put together a multimedia PFAS working group where we pull others from each of their divisions, bring them together, and have them work together on analyzing a specific industry. We have multiple industries across North Carolina, and the only way that we're able to fully tackle these industries is to build our knowledge base. So we're going to start by working together through that multimedia curriculum, where we are going to sit down and start with the facility from just conventional regulated pollutants and work our way into trying to understand where PFAS could be in those various processes and those emissions. Since we need to develop critical thinking and knowledge base specifically for each individual, we're going to put together little mini research projects to have individuals understand where they can find this information, so we can empower them to be able to find that information during the permitting process and the compliance process. We'll come back together, and our goal is to develop a permitting multimedia reference database where for example, permit engineer could input the NAICS code or the industry that they're trying to permit and pull from the information that we generate to have a starting place of understanding where PFAS could be used. This is going to allow us to take one person who has the expertise and the ability to find this information and kind of have that trickle down effect and increase the capacity and the strategic thinking within our organization to know how to handle PFAS across the agency. This is allowing DEQ to go from being reactive with chemours in 2017 to now being proactive and trying to get ahead of either emerging industries like EV batteries and green technology, but also handling existing facilities across North Carolina.
We good?
We're good.
All right, fantastic. I heard some clicking at the end, so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't hopping into Stephanie. Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. It's really fantastic to hear these different points of view. I think one of the things that we've got as a question relative to PFAS and what you're talking about is those places where there's an interface, right? You know, like, okay, so we want to be able to land apply biosolids, and we know wastewater treatment is able to capture a lot of stuff. So then, okay, the PFAS ends up there. We don't want it to be a problem for people with drinking water. So how are you managing it when it almost like it comes in, you know, in a sense, dirtier than when it goes out cleaned up? We certainly think about these with some various compounds in drinking water. We think about the rules for the FDA and the rules for the EPA in terms of drinking water quality. Now we're thinking about wastewater treatment, the rules for drinking water, the rules for solid waste, the rules for what's going on with wastewater treatment. How do you bring those perspectives together when you know industries are looking for not adding cost to their bottom line, but still protecting the environment? So how do you navigate when folks are saying, hey, their problem, not mine? How do you get people to step forward and say, well, you know, actually, I can probably, for the least cost, actually deal with the problem here in my industry. So it's on me. I'll take care of it and I'll bear the cost. How does that play out when you're having those kind of conversations?
Those are definitely a challenge. One of the things we've discovered is even trying to get an industry to tell us if they deal with PFAS, we have to actually broaden out to ask if you deal with a fluorinated compound. And there's some industries that really know their process. And then there's some industries that really don't know if they're dealing with PFAS, and we really have to be educated to walk them through that, which is why we're taking on this multimedia effort. What we have found is that if we are familiar enough with that process in that industry, and we come forward with the question of, we are aware that there might be a fluorinated compound in this electrolyte. Do you deal with a non-fluorinated or fluorinated compound? We then finally get the answers that we need to then be able to assess what we do with that information. From the biosolids perspective, and some of these existing infrastructures that are not producers, they're passive receivers. We're trying to understand what the sources are upstream and try to make the pollutants, the polluters accountable for that. And that's going to be a challenge, because if you talk to any company that says they're an environmental steward, they're usually then going to follow up with, regulated compounds. So with PFAS not being a regulated compound yet, or have MCLs, it's really challenging to get an industry to be proactive and voluntarily deal with these compounds. I think that's something that we're still trying to evaluate. We're still trying to assess and then determine how we can proactively work with these industries to reduce the sources upstream of drinking water facilities.
Perfect. Now, and I can immediately think, I'm thinking like mass balance. It's the classic environmental engineering and science kind of tools, but I'm imagining there's got to be some additional tools. So, if a student is thinking about this, or somebody's thinking about this as an additional career or a second career or a career pivot or move or something, what skills do people need to be able to work in this space? Because this is probably not the standard, I go out and I set up my spreadsheet and I do some design of some unit operation in a treatment system, right? This is much more in that system space. So what would be additional skills that people would be looking for to be proficient and to have a successful career in the space that you're working in?
I think that's a really great question. I think one of the things that I think about is, I would say most of us, probably pre-2016, 2010, really when we started the C8 studies with 3M and DuPont, no one was really an expert unless you're an organic chemist and really understood how to synthesize these carbon fluorine bonds and compounds. I think the biggest thing that I like to tell students in general is, as a PhD, as a master's student, or even as a bachelor student, having the creativity and the critical thinking and being resourceful and knowing where to find the information, you could bring a lot to the table. And even myself, my background's primarily solid waste, but I've had to delve into the semiconductor industry, the EV battery industry, and just have the ability to go through scientific information, synthesize it, and start thinking about just the conventional processes, ignoring PFAS, and then think about how PFAS behaves, how it partitions, and hypothesize where we could be dealing with PFAS emissions. And then the next step is to really test those theories and have an informed, prioritized sampling plan in place to start evaluating those industries more holistically.
Fantastic. No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Round of applause. Really appreciate that, Stephanie. Fantastic. Dr. Bolad, thank you. Well, we have had a fantastic event today. 4 Pachachka presentations: Lee Blaney, Dylan Hoffman, Narapam H., and Stephanie Bolard. I don't know about you, but I really learned a lot. I think it's a fantastic format to be able to get a lot of information very quickly. I appreciate those of you that threw some questions in the QA box. I appreciate those of you speakers who took some opportunity to throw some answers in as well. Please remember, participants, always feel free to reach out to speakers directly or to reach out to Academy staff or myself, and we can help put you in touch with speakers. Once again, today's Pachachka for me was being hosted from the beach down in Florida. Part of what we're doing with the Academy, with the Pachachka events and things like this, is to be inclusive, to make this a place where folks feel like that they can strike a work-life balance and still be engaged in the Academy where they're at in their career, in their personal and professional life. And so I went ahead and did this moderating remotely on vacation just to show you that there's lots of different ways to get involved with the Academy, and it's an inclusive environment where we welcome a whole bunch of different views under the same tent. So Marissa, I will turn it back over to you so that I can hit the beach.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you everyone for all your questions, and thank you to all of our speakers today for sharing your knowledge. If anyone would like to reach out directly to our speakers, feel free to email me and I can put you in touch. We really enjoyed being with you all today. We have several webinars planned in the near future, so you can go to aaees.org/events to check them out and register. And if you're interested in sponsoring an upcoming webinar, you can reach out to me directly. My email is mwaterman@aaees.org. Just a reminder, if you're not yet an AAES member and you're considering joining the Academy, please email me and we can discuss our membership options. Last but not least, the PDH certificates for this event will be sent out sometime this week. And we'll also be sending out a link to this recording in case you'd like to watch it again. That's all for today. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.